The order is already moving. It exists as ink before it exists as action. Typed, copied, stamped, filed, and released. It does not arrive with urgency. It arrives with certainty. Its language is clean, unambiguous, and final. Every line has been written to prevent interpretation. Every word has been chosen to remove doubt. It passes through hands that have handled thousands like it. Hands trained not to linger, not to consider. The paper is lifted, scanned, verified, and passed along. No one pauses. No one asks for clarification. The order does not invite questions. It does not acknowledge the possibility of error. It assumes correctness as a condition of its existence. It moves through rooms built for obedience, corridors designed for flow, offices arranged to ensure that decisions only travel downward. The order is never debated. Debate would require authority, and authority has already been exercised. By the time the order reaches its next desk, its legitimacy is no longer a subject. It has become a fact. The wording is precise. There are no contingencies, no allowances for change, no clauses that permit delay. It describes what must be done, when it must be done, and how compliance will be measured. It does not describe why. The absence of explanation is not an oversight. It is intentional. Each recipient recognizes the format immediately. The structure itself carries weight. Headers align with regulations memorized long ago. Reference numbers correspond to procedures drilled into routine. The order fits perfectly into the system that receives it. That fit is what makes it powerful. As it moves, it sheds context. Whatever uncertainty existed before its creation has already been resolved somewhere beyond reach. Downstream, there is only execution. The order is not a suggestion. It is not a plan. It is a directive, and directives are not evaluated. They are enacted. The system responds automatically. Logs are updated. Timetables adjusted. Resources allocated without discussion. Everything required to fulfill the order is already in place, because the system is designed for this exact moment. Efficiency is not questioned. Precision is assumed. No voice rises against it. There is no space for dissent built into the process. Silence is not enforced. It is engineered. Each individual involved understands their position clearly. Responsibility narrows as the order descends until it disappears entirely into procedure. By the time the order reaches those who will carry it out, it has lost all trace of origin. It is no longer connected to a person or a decision. It is simply what must be done. The order does not feel dangerous. It feels routine. And because it feels routine, nothing stops it. The system has accepted it. The sequence has begun. Every step that follows is already implied. The outcome is no longer preventable. The structure receiving the order is already aware. It does not react to the directive as an interruption. It absorbs it as confirmation. The hierarchy has been built to ensure that once an instruction enters the system, it encounters no surface rough enough to slow it down. Every level exists to translate authority into motion, not to evaluate it. There are layers, each defined by responsibility rather than discretion. At the upper levels, authority is abstracted into policy and expectation. Below, it becomes schedules, checklists, and verified acknowledgments. Further down, it resolves into tasks measured in minutes and meters. At no point does the order stop moving. At no point is it held long enough to be questioned. Each transfer is formalized. Receipt is confirmed. Compliance is anticipated. Deviation is neither discussed nor imagined. The structure has no vocabulary for refusal that does not also imply collapse. To question would be to interrupt flow, and interruption is treated as malfunction. Training has already done its work. Everyone involved has been taught the same lesson, reinforced through repetition and consequence. The system functions because orders are followed exactly as given. Adaptation is permitted only where explicitly authorized. Initiative is acceptable only within predefined boundaries. Outside those boundaries, obedience is not a choice, but a requirement. The environment reflects this logic. Spaces are organized to reflect rank and role. Doors, desks, and corridors enforce separation. Information moves along approved channels, stripped of ambiguity as it descends. By the time the order reaches the operational level, it has been reduced to a sequence of actions that appear self-evident. No one along the chain possesses a complete picture. This is not a flaw. It is a design feature. Each segment understands only what it must, nothing more. Context is compartmentalized. Awareness is localized. The system does not rely on understanding. It relies on coordination. There are mechanisms for reporting anomalies, but they are procedural and slow. They exist to record deviation after it occurs, not to prevent it. The order itself contains no triggers for reassessment. It assumes stable conditions. It assumes predictability. The hierarchy has accepted these assumptions without formal acknowledgement. Meetings occur, but they do not concern the order's validity. They concern alignment. Timelines are synchronized. Resources are confirmed. The language used is neutral and technical. Words like risk and uncertainty appear only in standardized phrases, devoid of urgency. Those closest to execution notice details that do not align perfectly with expectation. They register these details as minor irregularities, not as warnings. The structure has trained them to classify concern as inefficiency. The order is clear. Clarity overrides discomfort. No one intervenes because intervention would require authority that no longer exists at this level. The hierarchy has already spoken. To escalate would be to suggest that the system is incomplete. The system does not reward that suggestion. Instead, compliance becomes a form of protection. By following the order precisely, each individual remains within the boundaries of acceptable behavior. Responsibility dissolves upward. Accountability becomes abstract. The safest position is inside procedure. The command structure appears stable, disciplined, and effective. From the outside, it functions exactly as intended. From within, it feels inevitable. Every participant understands their role and performs it without hesitation. The order continues downward, unchanged, reinforced by every hand that passes it along. The structure does not bend, it does not pause, it only executes. The order reaches the point where language becomes motion. There is no announcement marking the transition, no signal that execution has begun. The system does not differentiate between planning and action in any meaningful way. Once acknowledgement has been logged, the distinction dissolves. What follows is simply the next phase of the same process. Preparation unfolds according to established patterns. Equipment is issued, checked, and recorded. Movements are scheduled down to the smallest unit of time. Every action aligns with a reference point defined elsewhere, long before the present moment. The order does not require interpretation. It requires synchronization. Units align themselves to the timetable without variation. Each element moves when it is told to move, stops when it is told to stop, waits when it is told to wait. The rhythm is deliberate and controlled. There is no urgency in the pacing, only precision. The system values predictability above speed. Communication flows in short confirmation. Messages are exchanged to verify position, readiness, compliance. The content is minimal. The tone is neutral. There is no commentary. The order has already spoken. These exchanges exist only to confirm that it is being obeyed. The execution environment is quiet in the way institutions prefer quiet. Sound is present, but it is functional. Signals, engines, footsteps, mechanical routines. Nothing suggests alarm. Nothing suggests doubt. The absence of discussion is not notable. It is expected. Each segment performs its assigned function without awareness of the whole. Coordination replaces comprehension. Timing replaces judgment. The order has been broken into tasks small enough that none of them appear consequential on their own. Individually, they seem harmless. Collectively, they are irreversible. There are moments where conditions do not match expectation. Minor discrepancies in alignment, timing, or spacing. These are addressed procedurally. Adjustments are made only where the order permits adjustment. Where it does not, the discrepancy is noted and absorbed. The sequence continues. No one deviates. Deviation would require an alternative, and alternatives have not been authorized. The system does not reward initiative at this stage. It rewards accuracy. The highest standard is not success, but fidelity to instruction. As execution progresses, layers of redundancy activate. Backup systems mirror primary actions. Contingency resources are positioned according to plan. These measures create the appearance of resilience. In reality, they reinforce the same assumptions embedded in the original directive. They do not challenge its logic. They duplicate it. Supervision exists, but it is distant. Oversight is expressed through metrics and confirmations rather than presence. Reports are generated automatically. Status indicators remain within acceptable ranges. Nothing triggers escalation. Those carrying out the order do not discuss its purpose. Purpose has been removed from the process. It is unnecessary. The order has defined success in measurable terms, and those terms are being met. Progress is recorded. Milestones are reached on schedule. The system advances step by step, each movement validated by compliance. The lack of interruption is interpreted as confirmation that everything is proceeding correctly. Silence becomes evidence of success. By the time the final phases of execution begin, reversal is no longer possible. Dependencies have locked into place. Actions taken earlier have constrained all subsequent options. Even if uncertainty were acknowledged now, there would be no mechanism to address it. The order continues to be followed exactly as written. Procedure fills every available space where judgment might have entered. The system moves forward, intact and unquestioning, carrying the order toward its conclusion. The first indications of failure do not announce themselves. They emerge as deviations too small to justify interruption. A delay measured in seconds, a response that arrives incomplete but still within acceptable parameters. Data points that sit just outside expected ranges, not far enough to demand attention, not severe enough to authorize change. The system records these anomalies without interpretation. Recording is its solution. Once logged, the deviation becomes part of the official record, neutralized by documentation. The order does not include provisions for re-evaluation based on accumulation. Each irregularity is assessed in isolation, stripped of context, rendered insignificant. Execution continues. As processes advance, the environment begins to resist the assumptions embedded in the directive. Conditions evolve in ways the order did not anticipate. Not dramatically, not suddenly, incrementally. The system responds by enforcing compliance more tightly. Variance is corrected where possible. Where correction is not permitted, variance is tolerated as noise. Communication increases, but only in volume, not in substance. More confirmations are exchanged, more reports are generated. The language remains procedural. No one uses words that imply danger. There is no framework for articulating it without violating protocol. At certain points, results diverge from projection. The discrepancy is explained as delay, not failure. Delay can be managed. Failure would require acknowledgement. The system prefers delay. Delay implies that the order is still valid, merely incomplete. Attempts are made to recover alignment by accelerating some elements and pausing others, always within the limits allowed. These adjustments do not change the trajectory. They only compress the timeline. Pressure builds quietly as dependencies stack on top of one another. Those closest to the unfolding consequences become aware that outcomes no longer match intention. This awareness has nowhere to go. There is no channel for it. The order remains active. The hierarchy remains intact. The structure interprets silence as stability. Warnings surface indirectly. Equipment begins to underperform. Resources are consumed faster than projected. Coordination becomes strained as synchronization slips. Each issue is addressed individually, without reference to the larger pattern forming beneath them. The system does not recognize patterns unless instructed to look for them. The order did not include such instruction. As conditions worsen, procedural rigidity increases. Checklists are followed more strictly. Timelines are enforced more aggressively. The assumption is that error lies in execution, not in design. Compliance becomes corrective action. Information moving upward is filtered through layers that reduce urgency. Reports are summarized. Language is softened. Metrics are averaged. By the time data reaches a level capable of authorizing change, it no longer conveys instability. It conveys variance within tolerance. At the operational level, adaptation would require deviation. Deviation would require authorization. Authorization would require acknowledgement that the order is flawed. That acknowledgement never occurs. The order persists unchanged, even as evidence accumulates that it no longer corresponds to reality. The system has no mechanism to reconcile this mismatch. It can only continue to enforce alignment with the directive it has been given. Processes that were once coordinated begin to interfere with one another. Actions taken to fulfill one requirement undermine another. These conflicts are resolved according to hierarchy, not logic. Priority is assigned based on the order's original structure, not current conditions. Time becomes compressed. Decisions that were meant to be sequential overlap. Dependencies collapse inward. The system responds by accelerating execution, believing speed will restore coherence. Instead, it removes the last remaining margins for correction. The order remains in force. Even as outcomes drift toward irreversibility, the directive is still treated as authoritative. No alternative replaces it. No suspension is issued. The absence of change is interpreted as confirmation. What was once routine begins to carry consequence. But consequence is not a recognized input. The system does not feel pressure. It only registers compliance. By the time failure is undeniable at the lowest levels, it has already become inevitable at every level above. The structure has moved too far to reverse itself. The flaw has fully entered reality, and the system continues to execute. The collapse does not arrive as a single moment. It unfolds as a sequence of outcomes that the system is no longer capable of managing. Effects begin to exceed the categories designed to contain them. What had been logged as delay becomes absence. What had been classified as variance becomes loss. The order remains active, but its assumptions no longer correspond to anything observable. Processes fail in ways that are difficult to isolate. One action completes successfully and triggers another that cannot. Coordination breaks down not through chaos, but through excessive order. Too many elements move according to schedules that no longer align. The precision that once held everything together now accelerates disintegration. Resources are committed exactly as planned. That commitment becomes irreversible. Assets cannot be redirected because they have already been allocated. Timelines cannot be adjusted because dependencies are locked. The system has no spare capacity for reconsideration. Everything has already been promised to the order. Communication degrades without becoming emotional. Messages continue to follow format, but content loses relevance. Confirmations arrive too late to matter. Status reports describe conditions that no longer exist. The hierarchy receives information that is accurate in structure and useless in effect. Loss expands quietly. It is not dramatic. It is cumulative. Each failure creates conditions for the next. The system attempts to compensate by enforcing discipline more rigidly, believing that stricter adherence will restore control. Instead, it removes the last remaining flexibility. There are no acts of defiance. No one breaks formation. No one abandons procedure. The collapse is not caused by panic or disorder. It is caused by consistency. Every element behaves exactly as instructed, even when instruction no longer serves reality. As consequences multiply, the scale becomes visible. Entire segments cease to function as intended. Support mechanisms designed to mitigate damage instead propagate it, because they are governed by the same directive. Redundancy amplifies failure rather than containing it. The structure begins to shed components, not by decision, but by exhaustion. Systems fail because they were never designed to operate under these conditions, yet the order demands that they continue. There is no instruction for stopping, only for proceeding. Oversight remains distant. Metrics indicate deterioration, but deterioration is not defined as a stopping condition. There is no threshold for termination written into the directive. The absence of such language becomes decisive. The system reaches a point where outcomes can no longer be misclassified. What was once abstract becomes measurable in absence, in silence, in scale. The order has achieved completion in form, but not in purpose. No corrective action arrives in time to matter. Any intervention now would require dismantling the very structure that enforces the order. The system is incapable of that act. The collapse settles into place without resolution. It is not explosive. It is final. The directive has been carried out fully, faithfully, and without deviation. What remains is not chaos, but emptiness shaped by procedure. The order has ended what it was meant to control, and nothing within the system knows how to undo it. Afterward, the system does not pause. There is no formal recognition that something has ended. The order expires quietly, not because it is revoked, but because there is nothing left for it to act upon. Its reference numbers remain in archives. Its language remains intact. It is simply no longer active. Records are finalized, reports are submitted according to schedule. Language is standardized to remove irregularity. Descriptions are reduced to what can be verified and measured. Anything that cannot be expressed procedurally is excluded. Silence fills the gaps where explanation might have been expected. The hierarchy absorbs the outcome without visible strain. Responsibility diffuses across layers until it becomes indistinct. No single point carries the weight of the result. The system treats the failure as an event rather than a consequence of structure. Events can be filed. Structures cannot. Meetings occur to ensure continuity. Future operations are discussed using the same frameworks that govern the adjustments are described in neutral terms. Lessons are referenced without being specified. Nothing in the language suggests rupture. Those who remain continue to operate within the same routines. Positions are filled. Timetables resume. The absence left behind is acknowledged only where it interferes with logistics. Emotion does not enter the record. It has no procedural value. The order is rarely mentioned. When it is referred to indirectly, as a sequence of actions completed under unusual conditions. The wording avoids causality. Outcomes are separated from decisions. The system protects itself by controlling narrative. Training materials are updated slightly. New phrases appear. Old ones are emphasized. The changes are subtle enough to preserve continuity. They do not challenge the underlying assumptions that allowed the failure to occur. The structure remains intact. Its confidence is undisturbed. The mechanisms that carried the order forward are the same ones that now ensure normal operation. Efficiency returns. Predictability is restored. Somewhere within the archive, the order exists exactly as it was issued, clean, unquestioned, official. It bears no visible mark of what followed. The document remains correct within the logic of the system that produced it. The absence of accountability is not a decision. It is an outcome of design. No process exists to assign it without disrupting function. The system chooses function. Life continues within the structure as it always has. New orders enter. They move through the same channels. They are accepted with the same certainty. The flow resumes. Nothing in the system acknowledges that this has happened before. Nothing suggests it will not happen again. The structure waits, ready, for the next directive to arrive.